So I've done a video about the general IVF process, the injectable medications you take during it, the egg retrieval. And so I wanted to cover the last phase of an IVF cycle, which is the embryo transfer. This is essentially the fertility doctor transferring one embryo into the uterus of the woman or her gestational surrogate. And this is a very quick, painless process. Most fertility doctors now, they will only transfer one embryo. In some cases, they will transfer two, but for the most case, never more than that. It used to be common for women to have 3, even 4 embryos transferred, and this resulted in a lot of women having triplets or even more. And the reason why, doctors try to avoid even a twin pregnancy is because a pregnancy with multiples becomes more dangerous for both the mother and the babies. So ideally, the woman becomes pregnant with just one baby, which is why most times it's only a transfer of 1, again, sometimes 2. Okay, so this process begins with scheduling, and the scheduling of when the transfer occurs depends on if you're selecting to do a fresh or frozen cycle. And the video I'm going to do after this is going to talk more about why many doctors now recommend a frozen cycle. And a big part of this is because the process of freezing embryos, which is called vitrification or flash freezing, has really evolved, and it is so much safer than it used to be. And so again, I'm going to go deeper in my next video on why frozen transfers are so common now. So you'll work with your doctor to decide which option is best for you. With a frozen transfer, obviously they're not transferring a frozen embryo into the uterus. They thaw it first. But with a fresh embryo transfer, what happens is it's fertilized, or the eggs are fertilized in the lab, and then one of the resulting embryos is again transferred into the uterus, but it's not frozen first. And so this needs to occur 3 to 5 days after the egg retrieval. So there is a very specific time frame where the embryo transfer needs to take place in the case of a fresh cycle. And with a frozen cycle, the doctor can transfer the embryo really at any time. With this, the woman just needs to take medication to prepare her uterine lining before that happens. With a fresh embryo transfer, the woman doesn't need to take medication typically to prepare the uterine lining, because estrogen released from the ovarian follicles thickens the uterine lining. Women that are doing the frozen cycle, or if gestational surrogate is the one that's getting the embryo transfer, typically they take like estrogen, maybe also progesterone, to thicken the uterine lining. If the patient wants to utilize genetic testing before the embryo transfer, they do need to have the embryos frozen, because there's not enough time to do the genetic testing during a fresh transfer, and that transfer has to happen 3 to 5 days after the egg retrieval. So in that situation, again, not enough time to do the PGT, the pre-implantation genetic testing. And there's 2 different types of this testing. I'm going to do another video to cover that. So again, you have to freeze those embryos if you want PGT. In the case of a frozen transfer, again, that embryo is thawed before the transfer. And I also mentioned the medication that is taken before the transfer to prepare the uterine lining. Usually it's taken for at least about 2 weeks before the transfer to make sure that uterine lining is nice and thick. And then on the day of the transfer, all that happens is the woman goes into the clinic. The doctor places a speculum in the woman's vagina. It's the same thing that's used for pap smears, and removes any cervical mucus that could impede the embryo's ability to reach the top portion of the uterus, which is where we ideally want it to implant. And then an embryologist places the embryo in a catheter or a small tube, brings it to the operating room, and then using an ultrasound for direction, the doctor then inserts the embryo into the woman's uterus. This process usually takes less than 10 minutes. And then following the embryo transfer, the patient will usually take estrogen and progesterone supplements to just support the healthy implantation and development of the embryo. And then a little over a week or so after the transfer, the woman takes a pregnancy test at the clinic to see if she's pregnant. And I'm going to do a video on tips to get you through the wait between the transfer and that pregnancy test. Essentially helping you not take an at-home test too early, because it can be really common to take or have a false negative, which can be so disappointing. So I really recommend that women wait. I know it's so hard, but wait until you go into the clinic. And usually they do a pregnancy test through a blood test, which is really, really accurate and reduces the chance that you'll get a false negative. Okay, so that's just a brief overview of embryo transfer. Again, the upcoming video will be about why frozen transfers are becoming more and more common. If you have any questions about that, anything else about fertility, pregnancy, childbirth, anything else, let me know in the comments below.